Did you know that certain corners can have a psychological power over you? And there's only one way to beat it. What if I told you there's a perfect racing line that you never knew of? Half the Formula 1 grid didn't even know about it.
What?
There are only 2 drivers discovered who have been gifted with the ability to run on this perfect racing line. Before we get any further, we need to delve into the topic of rotation. You see, when weight is spinning around a pivot, the further the weight is from the pivot, the more weight torque it produces, the more inertia. Balancing center of rotation is all about making your car rotate around the center weight, the heaviest thing in your car, the engine, in order to have the least inertia possible during cornering. If you are rotating your car just by the steering wheel, this means the center of rotation is the rear differential. It's the pivot your car is rotating around. So in this scenario, you'd want the engine and all the weight to be at the rear differential. This way you will have the least inertia while rotating, the least weight torque. But if the engine is mounted in the front of the car, it is crucial to move the center of rotation forward to where the engine is, making the rear do more rotation than the front end. An F1 car has the engine in the mid position, so there is a need of front end and rear end rotation biased more toward front end rotation, as you want the center of rotation to be in the position the engine is. But we're talking about racing lines. Why does this matter? Well, let me cook. Michael Schumacher could control his car like it was one of his limbs. He could rotate his car effortlessly. But there was one chink in his armor. But simply rotating a car enough and hitting an apex early or late is not all a racing line is. It's not all cornering is. There is so much more. Let me open your eyes. Balancing the center of rotation, about all masters have mastered. They know how to rotate a car. Staying wide near turn in, coming on the inside to take a late or early apex, and then running wide for exits. Basic racing line stuff. Oh, they knew that from karting. But if this is so, why did Alexander Albon clip the inside wall at Baku? And why did Mr. Composure Sir Oscar Piastri crash twice, qualifying and race? You see, there's a specific rhythm of driving, a gift bestowed on only a few chosen ones. It's a racing line they use for ultimate efficiency and cornering top speed. And it's not about what part of the corner you make your apex. It doesn't matter late, early or mid. It's about what part of your car you make your apex. Let me explain. Whether you like it or not, the fact is when you are taking a racing line, your car is rotating around an apex. And this apex is not always the same one you think you're hitting. This is something called the center of apex. This is the foundational part of your racing line, which you are oblivious to. There's a first moment of turn-in point in your racing line. There's a peak rotation, and there's a time when rotation stops and you're just putting the power down. The fact is that balancing the center of rotation in a front engine car, it's gonna take more time to rotate. You'll be covering more distance to initiate the perfect rotation. In a Porsche where you're basically just turning the wheel, you're immediately hugging the inside of the corner. The front is facing the apex already. In a front engine car, the rear needs to go wide before pushing the front end into the apex. This is so whether you're drifting or understeering or whatever technique you're using. This means that in your Skyline GTR, you would need to start turn in much earlier than your bro does it in his Porsche 911. We have to observe Sir Senna's driving while discovering this. There's a specific timing for turn in and peak rotation. When you've got it perfectly balanced, that as you're beginning to rotate more and getting closer to the apex, as soon as your engine is in line with the apex, that's when you should be at peak of rotation. This is balancing your center of apex. Balance your center of apex and you will cover the distance of the visual racing line you chose in a shorter time without doing anything to go faster. This is the foundation of a racing line. Center of apex revolves around center of rotation, which revolves around your weight, all in the name of cornering top speed. Ayrton, Senna and Max Verstappen absolutely mastered their awareness, perfected center of apex till they got it right every single corner they drove. They both got to the point where it was as consistent as robotic. They perfected the racing line. Approaching a corner, Max and Ayrton brake very light. For entry, they have an extremely low level of braking just to lift up the wheel speed ratio and keep the nose down. And they both use the steering wheel to throw the car in, rotating the rear end with the front end. But in mid-corner, when the engine is in line with the apex, when they have peak rotation, that's where the rotation differs. Max Verstappen uses very light braking, whereas Senna uses the acceleration, his throttle technique. So to put it stupidly simple, a front engine car, you drift the rear end out wide and then you push the front end into the apex with the rears. A mid-engine car, you wrap around the corner. A Porsche, you wait till you've missed the apex and then you turn in. However, taking certain cars with the exact same build, engine in the same place but differently tuned, turn-in rotation initiation points would be different, but still producing the same result. If you and your bro both have Lotuses or low tie, but your one is tuned to have a very grippy rear end and a sluggish front end, well, you're going to be turning in earlier because it takes a while to start rotation. Whereas your bro with the perfect front end, well, you can turn in slightly later because it's not about your steering angle, it's not about your inputs, it's about what your inputs produce. It's about the rotational point, peak rotation, the center of apex. When are you putting your power down? This has been greatly simplified and we understand it, but it is not this simple. If it was, then why is the world-class driver Alex Albon out of qualifying, starting P20 on the grid for Baku? You see, tracks like Baku, Adelaide and Phoenix of old, all these tracks with braking, unforgiving 90-degree corners. These specific corners on these specific tracks are the most brutally punishing to any imbalance of center of rotation and most specifically center of apex. Oh, and then Monaco and Singapore scale it up to 11. It's as brutal as psychological. Drivers are trained to take what we famously know as the normal racing line. But on the Formula 1 grid of what should be the 20 greatest best racing drivers in the world, all the greatest champions except 2 have cracked. And most of the time, it's been at these bloodthirsty 90-degree corner tracks. And if you couldn't already catch on, perfect awareness for braking points is so crucial. I'm gonna say it. It's as important as nailing your center of apex. At a track like Baku, it will decide whether you P20 or P1. No middle ground. When a driver first discovers this type of corner, he sees that he has to turn the car very quickly and very much. The car needs to rotate because that outside wall is facing him directly in the face. It's not diagonally, kind of on the side, and it's very close to the inside apex. After trial and error, the times that they've crashed into the wall understeering, while a lot of them, not most of them, dare I say all of them, after that have been psychologically beaten by the corner, so that now every time they face that corner, every time they come face to face with that outside wall, out of panic, they turn in earlier, but then they see themselves rotating too much too early, heading toward the inside barrier, and then so they need to pull back on the steering and then turn in later. Rotation is messed up. You're approaching peak rotation with the wrong trajectory. You're needing to over-rotate, stress out your tires. You're going slower, you're inefficient, you're bound to hit the wall. It's only a matter of time. 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 Even Michael Schumacher, considered by a fourth, even maybe the third of the whole world, to be the greatest racing driver of all time, he did not have near perfect awareness. He could control his car like it was one of his limbs. He could rotate anything. If his car was slightly at a wrong angle, if it was desperately understeering, he could just nudge it, rotate it to face the perfect trajectory. But in that rotation, his racing line would be off. His center of apex was rather in front, where it should be in a front engine car, like he's driving some Mazda RX-7. So due to this premature center of apex, it would end up being an over-rotation, and he'd need to control this over-rotation so he doesn't hit the inside barrier or go on the grass. He was keeping his car way too tight. He could never stretch it out. Poor thing was cramped. In the end, he was covering more distance for the speed he was at. It's like he was taking the outside line on every corner. So trying to go fast on that same line, well, he'd just be stressing his car. Compared to the other drivers around him, he was legendary. But that's not the point, because it wasn't enough. There was a level of speed beyond a brick wall that he couldn't break. It stopped him from reaching a level of speed that the car was supposed to be at. But this wasn't wasn't just about his speed. This unbalanced center of apex also messed with his head, cause sometimes by accident he got it right. First of all, he would have had to have realized he could have entered the corner a little faster, but rather he just trusted in his technique. All of this trained him a bad perspective, so he never had a consistent racing line. This affected braking, everything. Thus in the end, though he had the faster car, he could never drive like Senna. Nope. Let me tell you something crazy. We know Ayrton Senna loved to play games with his opponents. If you haven't already seen the film made on him, then go check that out. The fact is, because of Ayrton Senna's perfected rotation and center of apex, the perfect racing line he always drove on, that contrasting with Michael Schumacher's technique, Ayrton could have used that as a lethal weapon against him. It wasn't very often that Senna changed his racing line. I'm not talking about the center of apex, I'm talking about the visual racing line you see on the track, early or late apex. But if he wanted to change his racing line while maintaining the same pace, he could have performed the hypnosis that Dr. Joshima performed on Takumi. He would have given Schumacher a brainworm and sent him off the track without even touching him. Truth is, he did do this before. He loved playing with his opponents. He controlled them like guinea pigs, but most of the time his scheme was in braking. To understand exactly what I mean about Joshima, go check out the video I made on him. Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc last year. Charles Leclerc this year at Monaco was amazing. At his pole lap last year, his awareness was nearly as perfect as Ayrton Senna's. So why does it vary? Why is it sometimes here and sometimes not? It's like a beautiful shooting star that rarely comes and goes. Well, that's because that's exactly what it is. You can bring the argument if a car's just been differently tuned and now the driver feels unexpected, unwanted understeer or oversteer. Using the technique they used on a good car and this understeering pig, it's going to send them offline. Drivers are used to a certain car that suits their driving style, where they know exactly when they should turn in. It matches their technique. But this is not what we're talking about. Yes, you can have a car that suits you and you can drive it perfectly. But Max Verstappen and Ayrton Senna can do this with any car. Look what Max was doing last year when his Red Bull was literally understeering like a lawnmower. He learned how to drive it. He beat Lando in the McLaren. It's second nature to Verstappen and Senna. No matter how a car handles, they'll find a way to rotate it and run it on the perfect racing line. They'll somehow refuse to unbalance their center of apex. It's their natural awareness. Look at this, Max got pole using understeer rotation. It's clearer than mud. These drivers that are subpar have to be perfectly in a zone to take the perfect racing line. And someone like Lando Norris, he'll pop in and out of that zone in mid-race. Can't even do it on every corner of the racetrack. But I know two drivers who can, and they do not need to be perfectly in a specific zone that only comes once or twice as a shooting star. These drivers were gifted with near perfect awareness. The rest was left up to them to perfect it, and by the environments they were in, by their own determination, by trial and error, analyzing their driving, training their instincts. They did it. They developed the perfect racing line. 1991 Phoenix Grand Prix of the USA. Before the race, during qualifying, for a moment Alain Prost had pole position. Senna quietly got into his car, and as he drove past the Ferrari pits, he put up his finger to Alain Prost and said, "Watch and learn, boy. Now I'm taking pole." He yawned and staggered the world. By the time it came to the race, that was just a peaceful drive. He immediately pulled away from the other drivers, built a cushion going near flat out for the start. That's what it looked like. Senna settled into a rhythm, not at the absolute limit, simply perfectly balancing his center of rotation and center of apex. He was doing so little. Perfect amount of little steering angle at the beginning before turning in to adjust the trajectory to face the inside of the corner better. Peak rotation perfectly timed for 81 laps. Because he perfected his rotation and racing line, he could do less and get more. It was a peaceful Sunday's drive, yet he managed to grow a gap of over 35 seconds to second place twice. Because he pitted in this race too. But you know what? When he pitted, he didn't go near second or third place. He had a 17-second cushion. But that was a luxury pit stop just for the hell of it. Because he was driving right, he could take care of his tires while going fast. Ricciardo tried to make a move on Mansell. He was an inch too late on braking and he was punished. Later in the race, he spun out in the easiest car to drive on the grid, with the semi-automatic gearbox that demands less attention from you, letting you focus more on your racing line. Mansell, Prost, the Lacey, they couldn't nearly keep up with Senna. Even though they were doing more with their inputs, they used more fuel and all, they still couldn't get near Senna. By the time it came near the end of the race, Senna slowed down to walking pace. The gap dropped right down to 9 seconds before he crossed the finish line. I've always wondered why when I look at other drivers on boards, I can enjoy them, but no other onboard addicts me. Only Ayrton Senna's and Max Verstappen's. I have an addiction. It's simply perfect driving. Look at Ayrton Senna at Brazil. Approaching this corner, deaccelerating, turning in the front tires at their limit. Peak of rotation achieved. Perfect point. Perfect center of apex. Perfect center of rotation. These hairpins and gentle sweepers, they are more kind to the driver, a little more forgiving than the 90-degree and 100-degree hungry serpents. Look at Senna at Adelaide. Ayrton Senna was the king of Monaco. Baku, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix street track, basically the modern day Phoenix. Carlos Sainz did an amazing job in qualifying and in the race this year. It was a splendid job. His racing line was a joy to see. And I'm not saying he's purely lucky, but you can just see the difference between his driving and Max Verstappen's. Because Max Verstappen on every day, on every circuit, has a perfect center of apex, just like Ayrton Senna. As much as it is half unbelievable that this is coming out of my mouth, we found perfect driving this generation. Just like the GOAT himself, Ayrton Senna. Max Verstappen is dangerously not far off. You'll know what Max Verstappen did on the Nürburgring. First time in real life on the Nürburgring. First time in real life driving that 296. 3 laps and he's broken the record, 3 seconds faster than everybody else, who had put blood, sweat and tears into trying to get their lap times perfect on the track, and Max just humiliates them like that. Are you serious right now? And if that wasn't bad enough, he gets into a race first time and wins. And this is all thanks to their motivation. They are only this good because of their own determination and willpower, calling no part of their driving adequate, good enough, but only aiming higher and higher, reaching for one thing: perfection. If there was any gap, no matter how small, whether the gap was on or off track, whether their opponent gave them the gap or whether they had to make the gap themselves, or if they saw the gap was in their opponent, they would be grateful and take advantage of that gap, like an apex predator with all their strength. What Ayrton Senna said, if you no longer go for the gap, you're no longer a racing driver. This is not just about overtaking on the track. This is lifestyle. Do you get it, G? These little spurts, these shooting stars, these opportunities that other drivers get to be in the zone, getting the ability to ride on the perfect racing line, they are gracious gifts. These are gaps. These are gaps. They might be smart enough to take the gap in the moment and use it, put on a stunning pole lap. Have you heard of Charles Leclerc? But whether he is smart enough to take advantage of that by untraining his instinct of the wrong line he had when he was not in the zone and retraining his instincts to have the perfect racing line, well, that's something else that remains to be his decision. Saying that, Charles Leclerc is a phenomenal rare talent. He actually has amazing awareness. There's one driver who reminds me of more than any other: Gilles Villeneuve. So on the topic of Ayrton and Max taking advantage of the raw talent gift of awareness, building on that and training their instincts and all, to put it simply, all I'm gonna say is there's a reason some drivers get many big shooting stars and others only get 1 or 2. So what we just talked about, what are you doing with that shooting star? Was it sent to you for nothing? If you're gonna waste it, you're never gonna get it back again. Ayrton Senna used to sit in his bed for hours practicing his steering technique. Both of them used to go-kart in the rain so long till their hands got to the point where they broke if you looked at them wrong. And from passing the exam of training their instincts, taking advantage of what they've been given, while their galaxies lit up, this is why they are who they are.